Hi, folks. Welcome back to Crisco's Corner. Let's talk about a topic that's pretty relevant in today's politics, and that's court packing. That's where you add justices to your Supreme Court, usually at the national level, in our case, the federal level, the Supreme Court. But it's interesting, to say the least, that we'll read this story. When court packing goes wrong, Venezuela and other Latin American countries offer sobering reality. Experts warn that adding court seats has been attempted in other countries, often with disastrous results. Let's check it out. The concept of adding more seats to the U.S. Supreme Court, or so-called court packing, has been a central part of the discussions in the weeks leading up to the presidential election, particularly with Vice President Joe Biden declining to address the issue. I mean, to be fair, this has been talked about in the past. I know FDR wanted to, and a lot of his New Deal initiatives were found unconstitutional, and they were. That's the check and balance on the court. That's what the founders wanted. They wanted legislative, executive, and judicial. Judicial holds the other two in check. That's why they're lifetime appointments. That's just American Civics 101. But when you pack them, it becomes irrelevant. The judicial branch disappears and the legislative branch takes it over, which is not the point. But I digress. Earlier this month, a Democratic candidate said voters will know his opinion on the matter when the election is over. Well, I heard he said he's going to give his opinion on it when Judge Barrett is confirmed. So who knows? The fact of the matter is, Biden's been around long enough to know that it's a disaster. It's not a good idea, but he can't say that because his progressive leftist portion of his party will be up in arms. So, I'm not feeling bad for Joe Biden, but they put themselves in they paid themselves into a corner. If Biden and a Democrat-held Senate would add more judges to the Supreme Court, they could flip it to the left and reverse what they say are often ill-gotten Republican gains on the court. Well, that's because the progressives and the leftists have always used the judicial system as a hammer to pound in their agenda, the agenda they can't get through the legislature, and that's the evil part. But observers in international governance warn that adding court seats has been attempted in other countries, often with disastrous results. You need to look at what has happened in other countries. Don't touch the Supreme Court, said Antonio Canova, a constitutional law professor at Universidad Católica Andrés Bello in Venezuela, told Fox News. Nowhere is the history clearer than in the socialist country, Canova said. Venezuela's constitution follows the same structure invented by the founders of the United States, with an executive branch, a legislature, and a Supreme Court. And just for whatever it's worth, department, there's a mirror of Hugo Chavez. Oh, my God. When the late Venezuelan socialist Hugo Chavez first won election in 1999, the country's Supreme Court was independent. But after it issued several rulings that went against him and his administration, Chavez packed the court by passing a law expanding its size from 20 to 32 justices in 2004. Chavez got to pick the 12 new justices, effectively stacking in his favor. Canova compiled research on 45,000 rulings issued by Venezuela's High Court since 2004. Says the court never sided against Chavez's government after it was packed. Since 2004, I found that Chavez's government never lost a case, not a single one. People from the U.S. can learn from this. It was only after Chavez stacked the court that in 2006 he ran a fully socialist platform. Folks, this isn't 50 years ago, 100 years ago. This isn't the Russian Revolution, the Soviet Union. This isn't beginning of Maoist China. This is recent developments. When he won re-election that year, the justices of the Supreme Court stood and chanted a rhyme to the effect, "Great Chavez is not leaving." You got to be kidding me. But what happened after that? Chavez's 2006 win, he began confiscating thousands of private businesses, including media outlets, oil and power companies, mines, farmers, banks, factories, and grocery stores. They basically took over the country. One video shows a shop owner in tears as his business was confiscated. Without control of the court, they couldn't be able to do any of this, Canova said. because the judicial branch was basically negated. The government had no fears of legal repercussions for their actions. So since 2004, the government had taken opposing political parties, that they have taken political prisoners, that they have taken over businesses. It's the Wild West. Folks, be afraid. Be very afraid. When Chavez died of cancer in 2014, he handpicked his successor, Nicolas Maduro, a foreign bus driver who continued the same hardline socialist policies. The government takeover of the economy, combined with a plunge in oil prices, transformed a country once hailed as the richest in Latin America to be plagued with mass unemployment, starvation, rampant crime, hyperinflation that broke 10 million %. Now, folks, I want you to keep close attention to the next few lines here. It was the climate of decline which saw angry Venezuelan voters overwhelmingly turn out against Socialist Party at the 2015 midterm elections. Opposition parties won a shocking supermajority of 2/3 in the National Assembly or Congress. Remember, their setup is just like ours, for all intents and purposes, which should have enabled them to override Maduro. But before the new legislators took office, the outgoing socialist-controlled legislature hurriedly replaced 13 Venezuelan Supreme Court judges whose terms are running out, and what Canova called yet another case of court packing. When the legislature was seated, the restacked court started stripping it of its powers, even declaring that the embattled Maduro had the power to change existing laws without getting the changes approved by the legislature, i.e. dictator. And it happened fast to one of the richest countries in Latin America. Look at this picture. This is what it is now. People don't think that these things in Washington affect them. Yes, it will. Look at this. Here we go. The Supreme Court actions reached absurd levels in 2017 and declared that the legislature was illegitimate and all its powers could be transferred to the Supreme Court itself. You don't think that can happen here? You don't think so? It can. Believe me. I like to say that I would be supportive, and I think the vast majority of the American people would be supportive of the legislature doing an amendment to the Constitution, which says you cannot increase or decrease the size of the U.S. Supreme Court or any other affiliate courts in the U.S. federal system without an amendment to the Constitution. In other words, saying that you have to have an amendment to do that, which means the vast majority of the American people and its legislators and its representatives has to vote for it. I think that would be very, very appropriate. The ruling sparked riots throughout Venezuela, as well as denunciations from neighboring countries. The backlash forced the court to back down. But despite pulling back from the ultimate power grab, the High Court still allowed Maduro to rule without consulting the legislature. In his 2018 presidential election, all serious opposition candidates for president were either jailed or banned from running. And Maduro won a re-election easily. Oh, yeah, if you're the only guy on the ballot, you could die and still win. The election was declared illegitimate by the United States, the European Union, and the Organization of American States. You have the OAS against you. I'm sure it was a majority vote against it, except for Venezuela, of course. If you recall, the OAS, the Organization of American States, very rarely votes unanimously. And the one few times that I can recall from history is the missiles in Cuba in the 1960s when John Kennedy was president. Rest his soul. On Maduro's inauguration day found that election, the opposition held legislature declared that Maduro was no longer the rightful leader and that Juan Guaido, I'm sure I'm pronouncing his name wrong, the legislative speaker was taking over as president. That set off a near civil war in Venezuela with both Guaido and Maduro currently claiming to be the country's rightful leader. You want that here? You're worried about Trump or Biden accepting results of election? This is 10 times worse. 10 times worse. Venezuela is a warning that can happen in the U.S. But while it is a cautionary tale, he knows that the U.S. has a culture that could keep the damage of court packing well below Venezuelan levels. He pointed out to a long tradition of skepticism towards government power in the U.S. I hope that's true. I hope that's still true. Americans don't like to be told what to do, period, let alone by a government far away in Washington. He said if people start thinking that the power of the government is benevolent, things will go down a bad path. Yeah, of course. And that's the problem with a lot of these younger people. They think the government is just there to look out for you, and they're all in your best interest, and we're going to tax the rich people and take care of everybody. It's a formula for disaster. Disaster. It's been tried in many countries. Human Rights Watch noted in 2004 as part of its condemnation of Chavez's first court packing that during the 1990s Argentina's president, Carlos Menem, severely undermined the rule of law by packing the country's Supreme Court with his allies. Gee, do you think? He expanded Argentina's high court from 5 justices to 9 in order to prevent the court from striking down his plan to confiscate businesses. You see a pattern here? I do. Within a decade, the South American country entered the Argentine Great Depression again. This has been tried over and over and over and over. You take over the judicial branch. You take over the information that's put out by its media. And you put out the information you want. Then you take over the judicial branch and you're good to go. In Peru, former President Alberto Fujimori went even further in controlling the courts through mass firings and denial of tenures to judges, Human Rights Watch noted. This triggered a subsequent meltdown of democracy. And here is a picture in a courtroom. People will always take power if you let them. The concept of court packing actually is not new in the U.S. In the 1930s, former President Franklin Roosevelt proposed it after the court struck down his biggest New Deal plans, including government price controls. Roosevelt wanted to add 6 justices, but the plan fell apart as Senate Judiciary Committee, even though it was a Democrat-controlled, declaring the plan an invasion of judicial power, such as never been attempted in this country. I hope and I pray that it's the same, that their hatred for Donald Trump does not override the will of the American people in the setup of the founders with the Constitution. I pray it's the same. I really do. Roosevelt's plan was defeated in the Senate by a vote to 70-20. To even get got to a vote is alarming. At present, a handful of Senate Democrats have expressed opposition to stacking the court, including Joe Manchin of West Virginia, Kristen Sinema of Arizona, and Dianne Feinstein of California. But many others support adding justices or decline to answer, such as incumbent Tina Smith. Her Republican challenger, Jason Lewis, condemned the lack of an answer and told Fox News that court-packing threats are an assault on the constitutional separation of powers, a clear and present danger to our system of government. Exactly right. It is. It would be a disaster, a total disaster. They're looking at short-term political gains instead of a long-term of the country itself. There he is, Hugo Chavez. What a hero. He ruined the richest country in South America. It's incredible. It's incredible. But folks, we have to say, this isn't about Trump and Biden, the election. This is about the future of the Constitution and the American way of governance. It's the most beautiful setup ever devised. Is it perfect? No, because we're dealing with an imperfect product. People. What is this saying? A person is very smart. People are really stupid. Individually, people are smart. When they get in groups, watch out. This is a disaster. Just 5 years ago, maybe even sooner, all these same people would have questioned about packing in the court and said, oh, what are you, nuts? That's stupid. No. And there has to be something somewhere in the constitutional scholars and lawyers that can prohibit this. I'm telling you, folks, this seems like a trivial matter because you're not in Washington and you lead an entirely different life than these people, but it will destroy this country. I'm in my mid-60s. I'm not going to live forever, but I fear for my children, my grandchildren, and you should too. What about 100 years from now, when this place is just another country instead of the United States, the most powerful, wealthiest, and best country in the world? I'm telling you, folks, even if they're not denying that they go along with it, is just too far. Please, all of you out there, call your representatives, your senators, your congressmen. Have every person have two people call, and have those people have two people call, and keep calling and keep demanding that they put this nonsense aside. It will destroy the country, the richest, most productive country that ever lived. Folks, this is important. Please pay attention. Anyway, folks, thanks for your time and attention. I appreciate it. And until next time, goodbye and good luck.